Okay, this is going to be the review for test number 1. If you can get through all this material, and if you're even a little bit more concerned, you could go back over the handouts that we did in class, but this will get you through the actual problem. So you find the file, it looks like this, in Blackboard. Okay, so here's all the questions. They're going to be on the PowerPoint as well. I would try to actually work through, most of these on your own before just sitting and staring at this, because that will help you study. All right, so first question, we're going to look at levels of measurement. So remember, nominal is just like naming, ordinal, putting things in order, ranking. Interval and ratio, as soon as you see the word number or you know it's a count, it's going to be one or the other. Remember the difference between interval and ratio. Ratio, something 2 times an amount makes sense. There is a true zero, where interval, a zero doesn't make sense. So the number of cell phones in the household, well, I think I can have twice as many cell phones as you, so that would be ratio. Monthly data usage, once again, maybe I use half the amount of data, so ratio. Number of text messages exchanged per month, twice as many text messages. Voice usage per month in minutes. I mean, it makes sense to have a zero, right? That you didn't use any minutes. Whether the cell phone is used for email. So that sounds like a yes or no question, so that's just nominal, a naming. How do you rate the overall help of UTSA registrars? Certainly that would be a ranking, an order, right? SAT exam score. Now this one you have to be careful of, because if you have an SAT score that's 2 times somebody, that distance really doesn't make sense. Okay, we don't say you're twice as smart as they are, right? And a zero doesn't mean that, in this case, that it doesn't, or that they didn't take the SAT, right? And so this would be interval. But again, I kind of use the word ratio, meaning that I made half the score you made, and so that doesn't make sense at all. So that's how I tell the difference. All right, here's a frequency distribution. Remember, this is just a count. So it says the owner of a fast food restaurant ascertains the ages of a sample of customers. So in other words, he had 6 customers between 0 and 5, 8 customers between 5 and 10, and so on. It says from this data, he constructs his frequency distribution shown below. Not really, it's over there. Approximately what % of customers are older than 20? So I think you would take the older than 20, 18, plus 10 plus 4, that would be how many, divided by the total number of customers. So you would need to add all of this column. That's where the 86 is coming from, and that's where you get the closest % for the answer. What is the relative frequency of the 4th class? 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, relative frequency just means relative to that class, so 23 out of 86. All right, for the descriptive statistics, I know we've been doing all this in Excel, but you need to be able to do it by hand. So actually practice doing this by hand. I don't mean completely by hand. You can use a calculator, right? But you need to know, how do you find the mean? You total all the grades, you add them up, and then you divide by the number of grades. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grades. And that gives you the mean, the average. How do you find the median? Please do not forget to put the numbers in order, okay, because that gets forgotten a lot. We just said that there were 6 grades, so there's not a complete middle. When there's not a complete middle, you take the 2 middle and you average them. So the median be 87.5. The mode is the value that shows up the most, or the value that's repeated. Nothing's repeated, so no mode. The variance, so this is one I would spend time and sit down and write this out. Remember, the formula for the variance up here is each data value, each grade minus the mean squared divided by the sample size, the number in the sample, minus 1. So I kind of show you in steps how I do it, and then down here is actually doing it out. So of course we found the mean, and then you subtract each value from the mean. So this 8.3 is coming from 87 minus 78.7. This 13.3 is coming from 92 minus 78.7. So notice you're subtracting each value, each grade, minus the mean, and then you're squaring it. That's what these values are. And then you add them all up. That's what that summation means, to add them all up, and divide by the sample size minus 1. This is something I would sit and work out manually. Don't you just sit and stare at this video, because this way you understand. That's why we talk about the variance. How do we vary around the mean? Well, we're taking each data value and subtracting the mean. All right, so then how do you find the standard deviation? You just square root the variance. Okay, so if I didn't ask you to find the variance, then you would do the same thing, but it just has a square root around it. All right. Empirical rule. I had lots of questions on this on the last homework, so definitely be sure you understand the empirical rule. A law states that 1 standard deviation is 68%, 2 is 95%, 3 is 99.7%. That is the law. Okay, this is a rule that somebody came up with. So it says, suppose a recent report states that for California, the average statewide price of a gallon of regular gasoline is $4.12. So the average is $4.12. Suppose the regular gasoline prices vary across the state by 8 cents. So now you can kind of get a feel of what standard deviation means. Okay, so in other words, we're varying. The spread is only by about 8 cents. Approximately 68% of the prices fall between what values? 68% would be the mean minus 1 standard deviation and the mean plus 1 standard deviation. I had many of you guys just put one answer on your homework, but it has to be a below the mean and above the mean value. I mean, it's an interval, right? And so we're saying between $4.04 and $4.20, that would be about 68% of our data. If I want 95%, that means you want 2 standard deviations. So you just either add the standard deviation twice or you multiply it by 2. So 2 standard deviations would be between 396 and 428. And then finally, 3 standard deviations, you just multiply by 3. This is a very important rule that you understand. Okay, so you're going to see this type of information later with the standard deviation, so get this down now. All right, suppose a customer wants to buy a brand new car and has choices of 2 different engines, 5 different colors, and 3 different interior packages. How many different cars can the customer select? Now, I tell you right here, this is the M times N counting principle. I won't tell you that on the test. So how many different ways can he select this is going to be the 2 times the 5 times the 3. This is what I talk about in class about, how many different pizzas could you order based on all the different toppings, the crust, the cheeses, and all that good stuff. All right, union, intersection, and complement. So we're given a sample space, which is everything. So numbers 1 through 9. And then we have 2 events. We have the event A, that these values show up, and we have the event B, that these values show up. Find the union. Remember, the union states everything in A and everything in B, and you just don't double count. You don't write 7 twice or 4 twice or 2 twice, okay? So it's everything in both sets. The intersection is only what they have in common. Okay, so the intersection of 2 sets, what do they have in common? So get the difference between the symbols down. The union, because that's all it'll say right there on the test, and then the intersection. And then the complement, I could write a little apostrophe. Okay, sometimes I do that, or even a line over the A means complement. So the complement means what's not in A. You actually have to go back to the sample space. So what's not in A? I don't see 1, I don't see 3, so 4, I don't see 5, I don't see 6, there's 7, and I don't see 8. Okay, so that means what's not in A. All right, so now we're going to look at a probability matrix. It says, according to a survey, restaurant owners in the U.S. buy must-have menus. 77% of restaurant owners believe they need to use social media as a marketing tool. So the probability they use social media is 0.77. Different survey revealed 80% of the restaurant owners started their careers at entry levels. So the probability of an entry level is 0.80. Suppose that 83% of restaurant owners who started their careers at entry level positions believe they need to use social media. So in other words, this is saying the probability they use social media, okay, given they actually started as a entry level is 0.83. And so assuming the percentages apply to all restaurant owners, if a randomly owner is selected, and we're going to go through the questions. So this is just first what I just said in words. I take the information and write it down. Okay, you can just use S and M, or not S and M, S and E. So the probability, social media, this is given. The probability entry level, they told us that. The probability social media given they were at entry level. So the next thing I do is construct my table so I can answer the questions. So I start plugging things in. Probability social media, yes. Probability entry level, yes. We said the entire table should add to 1. So now this helps me. Actually, I could go ahead and find those two values, but what I did next is I said, well, I know this given is connected to a formula for an intersection. And I know the intersections are these values within the table. So I could just do some algebra and solve this for the intersection. And so then this just simply says take the given times the marginal. And so I multiply those together and I get that value. Now I can just start doing the subtracting things. How did I get that value? 0.77 minus 0.664, because when you add those, they should equal that. How did I get that value? 0.80 minus 0.664, 1 minus 0.77. Here I can just see that needs to be 0.2 because that needs to add to 1. And then finally 0.2 minus 0.106 to get that value. All right, so once you get 3 values, you know, all these 2 were given. This wasn't given, so you had to do a little bit of manipulation. And then don't forget to put your 1 in. Now you're ready to answer questions. So what is the probability the owner does believe that he or she needs to use social media and started their career at an entry level? That's that value right there in the table. Okay, so that's yes, entry level, yes, social media. Well, I didn't mean all those to come up. Oh, well. What is the probability that an entry level believes that he or she needs to use social media? Or, okay, so remember, and is an intersection, or is the union. So you have to be careful because as we talked about with the union, something gets counted twice. So the probability that they need to use social media or they started an entry level position. So yes, entry level, 0.80. Yes, social media. Did you see what happened when I do this column and this row? That value got counted twice. So that's why we have to subtract it out. What is the probability that they do not believe social media? So that's a not social media, given they started entry level. Well, again, I manipulate the equation, or I write the equation, I should say, for the given. And so this says not social media, so no to social media, and yes to entry level. No social media, yes entry level would be right there, and then divided by the entry level. And so these 3 are pretty much going to be similar. So then the next one, this is a given once again. What is the probability the owner does believe social media? So yes to social media given not entry level. Okay, so once again, the intersection of yes to social media and no to entry level, which would be right there, and then divided by the no to entry level would be that value right there. And then the last one, what is the probability they did not start? So no to entry, given, I didn't underline these, that they do not believe social media. So in other words, the probability not entry and no social media. So the intersection of no divided by the probability of not social media, the 0.23. All right, so as you can see with something like this, make your table first, and then from there, you just start answering the questions.